If someone had told me a mix-up on a guest list would land me in the seat next to a billionaire, I would have laughed it off as a misunderstanding. Lena was already regretting saying yes to the invitation before she even stepped into the ballroom. She hated weddings, the forced smiles, the orchestrated emotions, the endless small talk with people she'd never see again. But she had promised her coworker, Raina, she'd go. Raina had begged, "Please, Lena, I can't survive my cousin's wedding without someone sane to talk to." So Lena had agreed, expecting to stay an hour, maybe two. What she didn't expect was to walk into the massive gilded crest ballroom of the Belrose Hotel, check in at the front desk, and be escorted by a smiling attendant directly to the main table. She was confused but didn't argue. Not until she saw her own name card, elegantly printed in silver ink, sitting right next to the head seat at the long bridal table. And there, in that head seat, sat a woman Lena had only ever seen in magazines and finance blogs. Sloane Vale, the famously private tech billionaire known for buying entire buildings in Manhattan and keeping her personal life sealed tighter than a vault. And now, here she was in real life, wearing an off-white custom suit with a minimal bridal corsage pinned to her chest, looking stunning, powerful, and slightly amused as Lena stood frozen beside her. "You're late," Sloane said, sipping her champagne without even glancing up. Lena blinked. "I think there's been a mistake." "No mistake," Sloane replied, finally meeting her eyes. "You're sitting here." Lena laughed awkward, trying to step back. "I think you've confused me with someone else." Lena Quinn, graphic designer at Lark & Company. Lives in Brookhaven, allergic to shellfish, rarely answers phone calls, hates public speaking, Sloane said. Her voice calm, her tone factual. "That's you, isn't it?" Lena's stomach dropped. She hadn't given her full name at check-in. And how the hell did Sloane Vale know any of that? "How do you sit?" Sloane said gently but firmly. People were watching. "Hey, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and drop a like to help us grow even more. And let me know in the comments. On a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story so far? Your feedback makes all the difference." The entire ballroom had quieted just a little, the way people do when they feel something off script is happening. Lena felt her throat tighten. "Seriously, what is this?" "It's a mistake," Sloane admitted, "but a useful one, and maybe even fate." Lena frowned. "I'm not following." Sloane leaned slightly closer. Her voice was low, private. "The woman who was supposed to sit here ran 30 minutes before the ceremony. Cold feet, I guess." And since the table was already set and the name matched, Lena shook her head. "You thought I'd just play along?" Sloane smiled. "I thought you'd be curious enough not to walk away immediately." "Which you are, aren't you?" Lena didn't respond. She was too stunned. Too caught off guard by this gorgeous woman with eyes like winter storms and a voice that made her feel like she was being let in on a secret no one else could hear. "There's no ceremony," Sloane continued. "Not anymore. But the dinner, the guests, the press, they're still here. And I need someone beside me tonight who doesn't flinch, who doesn't try to pry or perform. Someone real." "And you think that's me?" Lena asked, eyebrows raised. "I did my research." "So, you're asking me to what? Pretend to be your bride?" "No." Sloane said softly. "I'm asking you to stay just for tonight. Sit beside me. Share a dinner. Let them think what they want. Be my +1 to my almost wedding." Lena should have walked away. Every red flag was waving. But something in Sloane's eyes wasn't dangerous. It was lonely, honest, maybe even desperate. And Lena, against all reason, slowly pulled out the chair. "This is insane," she whispered. "Probably," Sloane agreed. "But maybe not the worst mistake you've ever made." And as the string quartet began to play again, Lena sat beside a woman she didn't know, who somehow knew too much and smiled at the cameras flashing from across the room, wondering what the hell she had just agreed to. The clink of silverware against fine porcelain filled the air, layered under a soft instrumental version of a jazz classic that Lena couldn't place. The grand ballroom of the Belrose Hotel gleamed around her. Warm light bouncing off gilded mirrors, tall flower arrangements dripping with soft pink orchids, and guests dressed in silk chiffon and overpriced confidence. Lena's skin felt too tight. Her dress, an old navy cocktail number she'd worn maybe 3 times before, suddenly felt underdressed, outdated, and way too revealing. Everyone at the bridal table looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion editorial. And next to her sat Sloane Vale, casually magnetic in her tailored cream suit, sipping her wine like none of this was strange at all. Lena hadn't touched her food. She was too busy pretending she belonged there. Sloane leaned slightly closer. "You should eat," she said, her voice low and meant just for Lena. "They'll think I'm starving you." Lena gave a tight, nervous laugh. "I don't even know what this is," she whispered, gesturing to the delicately plated dish in front of her. "Crab risotto with white truffle," Sloane answered without looking. "You're allergic to shellfish, though. Don't eat it." Lena blinked. "Right. Forgot you somehow know that." "It's not sinister," Sloane said. "I'd just like knowing who's at my table." Lena eyed her, skeptical. "You invited me by accident." "Technically, yes. But I decided to keep you here by choice." Sloane finally turned to her. "And you're still here. That says something." "I'm still trying to figure out if I'm part of a PR stunt or just collateral damage in a rich person's life crisis," Lena muttered. Sloane didn't laugh. Instead, she looked at Lena with something more serious. "She left a note," she said. Lena blinked. "Who?" "The woman I was supposed to marry." Sloane's fingers tapped softly against her wine glass. "It wasn't a real engagement. It was more of a merger. Two powerful families combining business and legacy. She and I liked each other, got along, but there was never love, and she knew that better than I did." Lena watched her carefully. Sloane wasn't performing. Her posture was composed, but her voice held tension, the subtle weight of something real. She said, "I didn't need a mirror. I needed a challenge." Sloane continued. "Someone who wouldn't just reflect the life I built, but push me beyond it. Someone unpredictable alive." Lena shifted in her seat. "And you think that's me?" Sloane finally smiled. "I didn't until you sat down." The table conversation around them buzzed with forced laughter and gentle gossip. Lena caught a woman across from her whispering something behind a napkin. Cameras flashed at intervals from a distance. "They think we're together," Lena said quietly. "Some of them probably think we just got married." "Let them," Sloane murmured. "It's easier than explaining the truth." "You mean the part where your almost wife bailed and you replaced her with a complete stranger who happened to have the same first name on the guest list?" "Exactly." Lena exhaled slowly. "What happens when this dinner ends?" Sloane looked at her. "We thank everyone for coming. Smile for the press. And then I ask if I can take you out for real. Somewhere quiet. No cameras. Just two women who met at a wedding that never happened." Lena's brow furrowed. "You're serious?" "Completely." Lena didn't know what stunned her more. The surreal chaos of being accidentally mistaken for the bride or the fact that this guarded, intimidating woman was speaking to her with genuine softness. "You could have chosen anyone," Lena said. "Why me?" Sloane studied her. "Because you didn't want to be here. And yet, you stayed. You're not performing. You're not trying to impress anyone. And somehow, in the middle of all this, you're the only one who feels real." Lena looked down at her barely touched plate. "This is insane." "A little," Sloane admitted, "but also, maybe not." There was a pause. Not awkward, just full. Lena didn't know what made her do it. Maybe the exhaustion. Maybe the heat of Sloane's gaze. But she finally picked up her fork. "I'll eat," she said. "But only if you promise dessert isn't shellfish." Sloane smiled. "A real one this time." "Deal." And just like that, something shifted. The tension didn't vanish, but it evolved from panic into curiosity. From chaos into something slower, more controlled. Over the next hour, they spoke in between courses about books, about music, about how Lena had once been in a cappella group in college and regretted it every day since. Sloane told her about being the only woman on a tech board full of men in navy suits, about how silence, when wielded correctly, could be louder than shouting. And when the last toast was made and the last camera flashed, Sloane turned to her and asked, "Do you want to get out of here?" Lena hesitated just for a moment, then nodded. And as they slipped out the side entrance, leaving the noise of the ballroom behind, Lena wondered if maybe, just maybe, the strangest night of her life was about to become the most honest one, too. The city looked different from inside the back seat of a black town car, the kind with leather seats that smelled faintly of expensive cologne and money. Lena sat quietly, her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes flicking between the window and the woman seated beside her. Sloane hadn't spoken since they left the Belrose ballroom, and the silence was thick, not awkward, but full of everything unsaid. Lena didn't know what to do with her hands, her breath, her thoughts. She felt like she was hovering outside her own body, watching herself play a role she hadn't auditioned for. "Do you always hijack strangers' lives like this?" she asked finally, her voice soft, but edged with a dry kind of humor. Sloane turned to her, lips twitching slightly, only on special occasions. Lena let out a small laugh, tension breaking slightly in her chest. "So, where are we going?" "Somewhere quiet," Sloane said. "You deserve a night that's actually yours." Lena tilted her head. "What does that mean?" Sloane didn't answer. Instead, she reached forward and pressed a button on the console. A divider slid up, separating them from the driver. "Privacy." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Is this the part where you reveal I've been recruited into a secret society?" Sloane smiled faintly. "No cults, no conspiracies, just dinner. Real dinner at this time, without eyes, without cameras, without expectations." "Is that what this is?" "A no-pressure date with the woman who accidentally made me her bride in front of 200 people." "Something like that," Sloane said. Lena exhaled through her nose, smiling despite herself. "You're very calm about all this." "I'm not," Sloane said. "But calm is the only thing I know how to be when everything else is a mess." There was something in her voice that made Lena turn to really look at her. Under the perfectly tailored suit, the glossy hair, the diamond-studded watch, there was exhaustion. Not surface tiredness, but something deeper, like Sloane had been holding her breath for years. "You don't seem like someone who loses control often," Lena said. Sloane's eyes flicked to hers. "I don't. That's why tonight was terrifying and freeing." Lena nodded slowly. "You didn't want to marry her, did you?" Sloane looked back out the window. "No, I wanted the illusion. I thought if I could just go through the motions, do what was expected, maybe I'd eventually believe in it. But she was braver than me. She walked away and left you to face it all alone until you sat down." Lena fell silent. There was weight in those words, and it settled on her shoulders in a way she wasn't expecting. The car pulled into a narrow street in Soho, stopping in front of a low-key restaurant with no name on the front. Just a soft glow behind frosted glass and the muffled sound of jazz piano from inside. Sloane got out first and extended a hand. Lena hesitated for a moment, then took it. Her hand was warm, steady. Inside, the restaurant was quiet, almost private, the kind of place that didn't need to be advertised because the right people already knew. A hostess greeted Sloane by name and led them to a table in a back corner away from the windows, half hidden by velvet drapes. Lena sank into her chair, feeling like she could finally breathe. "So this is where you bring your accidental wives?" Lena teased. Sloane let out a soft laugh. "No, this is where I come when I need to remember who I am." "And who is that exactly?" Lena asked more genuinely than she expected. Sloane looked at her for a long moment, "Someone who's still figuring it out." The waiter arrived with a quiet smile, offering wine, then leaving them with menus written entirely in French. Lena blinked. "I took Spanish in school." Sloane smirked. "I'll translate. Trust me." "That's a bold ask considering tonight started with identity theft." "Mild case," Sloane said. At worst, Lena laughed genuinely this time, and the sound of it made something ease in Sloane's shoulders. For the first time that night, Lena felt the air between them shift. The roles were still there. Rich woman, accidental guest, but something else was forming underneath, a kind of tentative curiosity, a slow, flickering interest that had nothing to do with the spectacle of the wedding. Over dinner, they talked about things that weren't headlines or contracts. Sloane asked Lena about her design work, about the art she made just for herself. Lena asked about the first time Sloane realized she hated being alone in a room full of people. They traded stories. Lena shared how her mother always said she had the heart of a stray dog, always picking up broken things and trying to love them whole. Sloane said she envied that she didn't know how to let things in unless they proved they couldn't hurt her first. And when dessert came, thankfully shellfish-free, they both reached for the same spoon at the same time and laughed. Soft, surprised, honest. The night stretched long until the restaurant began to dim its lights, signaling the end of the service. Outside, the city was quieter, the sky bruised with midnight. The car was waiting, but neither of them moved toward it. "So," Lena said, hands in her coat pockets. "Was this a date?" Sloane's expression was unreadable. "Did it feel like one?" Lena thought for a moment. "It felt like the start of something. Maybe." Sloane took a step closer. Not touching, just presence. Would you want there to be a second part? Lena's throat went dry. That depends on what? On whether this was about her or about me. Sloane's face softened. It started because of her, but it stayed because of you. Lena swallowed then. Yeah, I'd want a second part. Sloane didn't lean in. Didn't push. She just smiled. A real one, not for the cameras. And it felt like the kind of smile that said, I see you. Lena smiled back. Good night, Sloane. Good night, Lena. And then for the first time that night, they walked away from each other on purpose. No accidents, no confusion, just the possibility of return. Lena woke to sunlight slicing through the slats of her blinds and the distinct unwelcome vibration of her phone buzzing relentlessly against the nightstand. She groaned, rolled over, and pulled the blanket over her head, willing the world to disappear for just a little longer. But the buzzing didn't stop. After the fourth call in a row, she finally reached out blindly, grabbed the phone, and squinted at the screen. 8 missed calls, 4 texts, all from the same person, Raina. With a sinking feeling in her stomach, Lena opened the messages. Lena, what the hell happened last night? You were on freaking TMZ. USAT next to Sloane Vale and they're calling you her secret bride. Call me or I'm coming over. Lena shot upright, her heart pounding. She clicked through to her browser and searched her own name. The results were instant, and horrifying. There it was, a picture of her in that borrowed navy dress, seated beside Sloane Vale, caught mid-smile. The headline screamed, "Who is the mystery woman beside tech mogul Sloane Vale? Another wedding without a bride, or was there?" Below that, countless blurry paparazzi shots from inside the Belrose Hotel, all capturing angles of her and Sloane looking vaguely couple-like. She scrolled down to a video, a short clip where Sloane leaned in and whispered something in Lena's ear. Lena was laughing. The camera had caught everything. "Oh my God," Lena muttered, burying her face in her hands. The phone rang again. She answered before it could even vibrate. "Raina, I swear I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "Are you kidding me?" Raina's voice practically shattered her eardrum. "You sat next to her. You were at the bridal table. You looked like you belonged there. People think you two are married. It was a mistake. A literal mix-up on the guest list. She had a name card for a different Lena, I guess. And you just stayed?" "She asked me to," Lena said quietly. There was a beat of silence on the other end. "Wait," Raina said, her voice softer. "Are you telling me Sloane Vale asked you to stay?" "Yes." "And then what?" Lena leaned back against the headboard. "Then we had dinner somewhere private. We talked." "Oh my God, it wasn't like that. It wasn't romantic." "But you liked her," Raina said. Lena didn't respond right away. The image of Sloane's smile at the end of the night came back to her, sharp and impossibly real. "Maybe," she admitted. Another text came through. Lena checked it and froze. It was from an unknown number, but the message was simple. "Are you free for lunch today? V." Raina's voice cut in again. Was that her? "I think so. Are you going to say yes?" Lena didn't answer. She ended the call and stared at the message for a long time. Her heart beat too fast. Her mouth was dry. She thought about last night, the way Sloane had looked at her, not like a stranger, but like a mirror she hadn't dared touch in years. She thought about how easy the conversation had been. How surprisingly comfortable silence had felt between them. And now the whole world thought something had happened. That something was happening. She hadn't asked for any of it. But part of her, the part that wasn't afraid, wanted to lean in instead of run. She typed back where. Within seconds, Sloane replied, 112:30. The cafe on 10th and Mercer. No cameras, just me. Lena stared at the screen for a full minute before getting out of bed. The cafe was small, understated, and tucked into a side street with almost no foot traffic. Lena arrived early, something she never did, and immediately regretted not wearing something less ordinary. She'd gone for a casual sweater and jeans, trying not to overthink it. But now, every inch of her felt too visible, too unprepared. Sloane was already there when she arrived, seated at a corner table with a cup of coffee in front of her and a tablet in her hand. No entourage, no driver, just her. Lena hesitated at the door for a moment before walking in. Sloane looked up and smiled, that same calm, unreadable expression that made Lena feel like she was walking into a test she hadn't studied for. "You came," Sloane said. Lena sat down across from her. The internet thinks we're married. I saw. You're not freaking out. Sloane shrugged. I've been the subject of worse rumors. I'm not used to being known. Sloane tilted her head. Then let's keep it unknown. Just us. The waitress arrived, took their orders, and disappeared again. Lena stared at the steam rising from her coffee. I'm not someone who fits in your world, she said. I'm not asking you to fit into it, Sloane replied. I'm asking if you want to get to know me, not the headlines. Lena looked at her carefully. Why me? Still can't wrap my head around it. Sloane leaned forward slightly, resting her arms on the table because you didn't come to that wedding hoping to get something. You didn't ask for attention. You didn't even want to be there. And when I asked you to stay, you stayed anyway. That means something to me. Lena swallowed hard. What do you want from me, Sloane? Sloane's expression softened. Time, honesty, and maybe a second chance at something that wasn't supposed to start, but somehow did. There was again that strange quiet pull. Lena looked down at her hands, then up at the woman sitting across from her, and for the first time in a very long time, she didn't want to run. The sound of the cafe door closing behind her stayed with Lena longer than she expected. As she stepped back into the street, the chill of the afternoon air brushing against her skin, something in her chest felt different. Not lighter, not heavier, just more awake. She kept replaying Sloane's voice in her head, soft, steady, sincere, asking for something so simple it felt like a trick. Time, honesty, and a second chance at something unexpected. Lena walked the next few blocks without direction, letting the city carry her forward on instinct. Her phone buzzed twice in her pocket, but she didn't check it. The moment felt too real to interrupt. It wasn't until she reached her apartment, climbed the narrow steps, and dropped her keys on the counter that she finally exhaled. Then she laughed, quiet, breathy, disbelieving. How the hell had she ended up here? 24 hours ago, she'd been dreading a boring wedding filled with people she didn't know. Now, the whole internet thought she was in a relationship with a billionaire. And worse, she wasn't entirely sure she hated the idea. She opened her phone. One new text from Sloane. Thank you for showing up. Let me know when I can return the favor. Lena stared at the message for a long time. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard before she typed. Are you always this polite after accidentally fake marrying someone? Sloane's reply came seconds later. Only when I want it to happen again, minus the audience. Lena's pulse kicked up. She read the message 3 times before letting her phone drop onto the bed. This wasn't a game. She could feel it. There was something real beginning to form. And if she let herself think about it too much, it might scare her off. So instead, she didn't think. She grabbed a hoodie, tied her hair up, and pulled out her laptop. Work had always been her anchor, the place where things made sense. But even as she opened her design software and started sketching a project she was behind on, her focus drifted, shapes blurred, colors lost meaning. All she could see was Sloane's expression across the cafe table. The way she'd said Lena's name like it wasn't just a label, but something she'd memorized on purpose. The next few days passed like that. A strange blend of routine and anticipation. Lena went to work, replied to emails, tried to act like nothing had changed. But everything had. She'd see Sloane's name in headlines, hear her voice in old podcast interviews, and suddenly she was no longer just a distant icon. She was a person Lena had seen laugh, soft, and listen. On Thursday afternoon, a messenger arrived at her office with a small black envelope. No branding, no note. Just a card inside with elegant handwriting that read, Dinner, Friday, 7:00 p.m. Dress however you feel most like yourself. The Lena stared at the card for so long that her coworker Marcus asked if she'd seen a ghost. She mumbled something about an old friend and shoved it in her bag, but the truth was that card terrified her. It wasn't the dinner, it was the implication of it because now it wasn't an accident. Now she would be choosing to go. Friday arrived too fast. Lena spent an embarrassing amount of time staring at her closet, rejecting everything she owned. Too formal, too casual, too plain, too loud, too not her. And then in a moment of surrender, she picked the outfit she wore when she felt most comfortable. Black jeans, a simple but fitted top, her favorite leather jacket, not a statement, not a performance, just her. She arrived at the address 10 minutes early and spent the entire time pacing outside the restaurant, working through a list of reasons not to go in. But then the door opened and Sloane stepped out, her expression calm and unreadable as always. But her eyes lit up when they met Lena's. You're here, she said. Lena nodded. I was afraid I wouldn't be. Why? Because if I walk through that door, it means this is real, and I'm not used to things like this being real. Sloane took a step forward, her voice gentler than Lena had ever heard it. Then let it be real at your pace. No rush, no pressure, just dinner with me. Lena exhaled and nodded. Inside the restaurant was quiet, warm, dimly lit. There were no cameras, no onlookers, just a private table and the sound of soft jazz in the background. For the first 10 minutes, Lena barely said anything. She let Sloane lead the conversation about a book she was reading, a boardroom disaster she'd narrowly avoided, a childhood memory involving a broken violin, and a very angry music teacher. Slowly, Lena started to relax. She told Sloane about her first design gig, making a logo for a bakery that paid her in cookies, about the time she tried to dye her own hair in college and ended up looking like a traffic cone. They laughed, they listened, they paused between sentences and let the silence sit there without fear. And then, halfway through dessert, Sloane asked, "What scares you most about this?" Lena looked at her surprised by the bluntness, but she answered that I'll start wanting more than what this is, and that maybe I don't belong in whatever more looks like with someone like you. Sloane didn't look away. You do, whether you believe it yet or not. Lena didn't reply, but something inside her cracked open just a little more. By the end of the night, when they stood outside waiting for their cars, the air between them had changed. Not electric, not explosive, just charged with potential. Sloane stepped closer, just close enough that Lena could smell her perfume. Thank you, she said. Lena tilted her head. For what? For choosing to come. For making this real. Lena looked up at her. And in a moment of boldness that surprised even herself, she said, I'm still scared. Sloane's voice was soft. So am I. They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But when Sloane's car pulled away and Lena stood there alone, she wasn't unsure anymore. She knew she'd see her again. Not because she had to, but because now she wanted to. The third time they saw each other. Lena didn't feel nervous walking into the space, at least not in the way she expected. It wasn't fear or doubt or that choking self-awareness that had wrapped around her chest the first 2 times. It was anticipation. Still sharp, still buzzing under her skin, but warmer now. She was beginning to understand that being around Sloane didn't mean walking into something overwhelming. It meant stepping into a space where she was allowed to breathe a little deeper. Sloane had invited her to her apartment. Not a grand penthouse like the tabloids loved to describe, but a surprisingly calm, modern place tucked into a quiet corner of Topeka. Lena had imagined minimalist coldness, marble and chrome. Instead, she found warmth, bookshelves full, art that felt personal rather than curated, soft lighting and walls the color of overcast skies. Sloane opened the door barefoot, holding 2 mugs of coffee, wearing a loose gray sweater and no trace of the CEO mask she wore in public. You came, she said softly. Lena stepped inside, suddenly more aware of her boots than she had any right to be. You invited me. Sloane handed her a mug. Still, you could have said no. Lena took a sip. Black coffee just how she liked it. She arched an eyebrow. You remembered. I pay attention. The corners of Lena's lips curved. She looked around. This place doesn't look like your press photos. Sloane shrugged. That place isn't home. This is. They settled into the wide window seat in the living room. The city stretching endlessly behind them. No scripts, no interviews, just space and quiet and the subtle awareness of being alone together. Do you ever get used to people watching you all the time? Lena asked after a moment. Sloane leaned her head back against the wall. No, you just get better at pretending it doesn't bother you. Lena studied her profile. The way her jaw tightened at the admission, the way her eyes stayed on the skyline instead of her. You looked calm at that wedding, Lena said. When I sat next to you, you didn't flinch. I've been taught to hold my expression no matter what, Sloane replied. But inside I was shaking. Lena looked down at her mug. So was I. Silence. And then Sloane turned her gaze toward her, her voice quieter. You still are sometimes. Lena nodded. This whatever this is, it's new for me. Not the dating, the feeling like it matters. Sloane's eyes searched hers. It does matter. Lena nodded again slowly. I know. The air between them thickened. Not tense, not awkward, but heavy with all the things they hadn't named yet. There was no rush, but there was gravity and it was pulling them closer. Sloane shifted slightly. Can I ask you something? Lena looked at her. Of course. What would it take for you to stop being afraid of this? Lena didn't answer right away. She took a breath. It's not fear of you. It's fear of wanting too much, of being disappointed, of falling for the idea and not the person. Then get to know the person. Sloane said, I want you, too. Lena smiled, small, real. Okay, ask me something. Anything? Anything? Sloane tilted her head. What's your worst habit? Lena laughed. That's where you're starting. It matters. Bad habits say more than good ones. Lena thought, I disappear when I'm overwhelmed. Shut off my phone. Avoid people. I shut down. Sloane nodded. Noted. Your turn. Lena said. What's yours? Sloane didn't hesitate. I work instead of feel. Lena met her eyes. Also noted. They both laughed and it was easier than either of them expected. Over the next hour, the questions continued. Small ones then deeper ones. Lena asked about Sloane's first kiss. Sloane asked Lena what kind of childhood she had. Lena admitted she still called her mom twice a week, even when nothing was wrong. Sloane confessed she'd once read the same book 3 times in a row just because it was the only thing that made her feel understood. And when the conversation slowed, when the soft hum of the city at dusk filled the room, Sloane reached out, not suddenly, not dramatically, just a quiet gesture and brushed a strand of hair from Lena's face. Lena didn't flinch. Her breath caught, but she didn't move away. Sloane's hand lingered for a moment, then dropped. Sorry, she said softly. It's okay, Lena whispered. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But it was there. That ache, that promise neither of them dared to speak aloud. When Lena stood to leave, Sloane walked her to the door. No shoes, no pretense, just a woman in her home looking at someone she wanted to keep letting in. Thank you for coming, she said. Thank you for letting me. Can I see you again? Sloane asked. Yes, Lena said without hesitation. This time, she wasn't afraid to want it. The knock came just after noon. Lena wasn't expecting anyone. And she hadn't left the apartment all morning, her laptop open on the kitchen table. Her second coffee half finished beside it, and her focus entirely broken. She had been trying to work, trying to lose herself in fonts and colors and client revisions, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Sloane. The way her voice had softened, the way her hand had brushed Lena's cheek like she was afraid of breaking something fragile. Lena hadn't realized how long she'd been smiling until her jaw ached. She padded barefoot to the door and opened it cautiously, expecting maybe a package, maybe a neighbor. Instead, she found Raina holding a coffee and wearing a look that said, "Sit down. We need to talk." Lena groaned. "Please don't tell me it's all over the internet again." Raina walked past her without waiting for an invitation, dropped her bag on the couch, and pulled up the article on her phone. "Try cover story," she said. Lena took the phone. The headline read, "Sloane Vale's secret bride revealed, the mystery woman finally identified." Below it, a photo of Lena from the night of the non-wedding, laughing, eyes on Sloane. The caption read, "Graphic designer Lena Quinn spotted again with tech mogul. Sources say the connection is more than friendship." Lena handed the phone back. "Well, that's subtle." Raina raised an eyebrow. "It's not going away, Lena. And it's only going to get louder." Lena sat on the edge of the couch, rubbing her temples. "I didn't ask for any of this." "But you didn't exactly walk away either," Raina said, her voice softer now. "Are you seeing her?" Lena didn't answer immediately. Then, yes. Raina's eyes widened. As in, we're figuring it out. Slowly, quietly. "There's nothing quiet about dating Sloane Vale," Raina muttered. "She's basically a walking headline." Lena looked at her, the question forming before she could stop it. "Do you think I'm being stupid?" Raina sat beside her. "I think you're being brave, but I also think you need to be prepared. If this becomes public, really public, your life changes. Not just for a week, forever." Lena nodded. She knew, but knowing didn't make the want go away. That night, she sat on her fire escape, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through her own name on Twitter like it belonged to someone else. People speculating, guessing, some of them cruel, some disturbingly invested, others strangely supportive, but none of them knew her. Not really. Only one person did, and she hadn't heard from her all day. She didn't want to text first, not because of pride, but because she didn't want to seem needy, desperate. But by midnight, the ache of silence won. Lena typed, "Rough day. Missed your voice." The reply came 5 minutes later. "Come over. No talking if you don't want. Just space and me." Lena didn't even change out of her sweater. She called a car, heart racing the entire ride. When she arrived at Sloane's, the door opened before she knocked. Sloane stood barefoot again, this time in a soft navy t-shirt and black lounge pants, hair down, eyes tired but warm. She didn't say anything, just opened her arms. Lena walked into them like she belonged there. No hesitation, no explanation, just gravity. Sloane held her tightly, silently, the kind of hold that didn't demand anything in return. Lena pressed her face into her shoulder and let herself feel the weight of the day fall away. After a while, they sat on the couch, still quiet, still close. Lena's head rested on Sloane's shoulder, her fingers loosely curled against Sloane's thigh. Sloane's hand moved slowly through Lena's hair, calming, steady, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with performance. "I didn't mean to pull you into all this," Sloane said softly. "But I don't regret that you're here." Lena looked up. "Neither do I, but it's getting harder." Sloane nodded. "I know. That's why I haven't called. I was trying to protect you, but maybe that's not my choice to make." Lena shifted to face her more fully. "I don't need protection. I need honesty." Sloane's gaze met hers. "Then here's the truth. I think about you more than I should. I check my phone like a teenager. I replay our last conversation before I fall asleep. And I keep telling myself to slow down, to let this breathe, but I don't want to let it go cold." Lena's voice was barely above a whisper. "So don't." They didn't kiss immediately. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was quiet, inevitable. A slow lean, a breath between them, and then contact. Lena's lips brushed Sloane's soft and searching like she wasn't sure it was real until it deepened. Sloane responded with that same steadiness. She gave everything, measured, sure, but filled with a heat that caught Lena by surprise. The kiss grew, not explosive, but consuming. Lena's hand found Sloane's shoulder, her neck, her jaw. Sloane's hands rested gently at her waist, then slid up her back. When they finally pulled apart, there was no need to speak. They sat there, foreheads touching, breathing each other in. And for the first time since it all began, Lena didn't feel like a mistake. She felt chosen, wanted, seen, and that was scarier than anything else, but also more beautiful. Lena woke slowly, the kind of slow that came with warmth and softness, and the quiet hum of safety. The first thing she registered was the weight of the blanket pulled halfway down her hip. The second was the faint sound of a city muffled by thick glass windows. And the third, the most grounding of all, was the feeling of a hand resting gently on her waist, not possessive, just present. She turned her head slightly on the pillow and found Sloane still asleep beside her. One arm curled under her head, the other draped around Lena like it belonged there. Her hair was tousled, her breathing even. And for a long moment, Lena just stared at her, committing the sight to memory as if afraid it might vanish. This wasn't how the night had been planned. It hadn't been planned at all. After the kiss, long, slow, and undeniable, they hadn't spoken much. Just looked at each other, touched carefully, moved together without rush or pressure. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't even about the physical. It was about trust. Permission. Want. Yes. But something deeper, too. Something neither of them had named out loud. Now, as sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, Lena shifted slowly, careful not to wake her. Her body acted in that quiet, pleasant way that came after closeness. Lena shook her head. "You're not rushing me. I'm just choosing whether or not to jump." Sloane didn't speak, just waited. After a long pause, Lena said, "Okay, I'll go." The next few days blurred into fittings, calls, quiet strategy sessions with Sloane's publicist, and a quiet, unspoken current of rising pressure. Lena watched herself being reshaped in photos she didn't know were taken, leaving Sloane's apartment, walking to work, sitting at a cafe alone. She'd become a story, and the story was spinning faster than she could hold it. But at night, when it was just them, no cameras, no stylists, no pressure, Sloane held her like she was still the woman she met by accident, and Lena held on tighter. The night of the gala arrived, and Lena stood in front of the full-length mirror in Sloane's room, staring at her reflection. The gown was deep green silk, fitted but not revealing, the neckline elegant, the back open. Her hair was up, soft strands framing her face. She looked beautiful but also unfamiliar. You look like yourself, Sloane said behind her. Lena gave her a look through the mirror. I look like a fantasy version of myself. Sloane stepped behind her, resting her hands lightly on Lena's shoulders. No, you look like the woman I've been falling for since the moment you didn't run. Lena turned around, heart catching. You've been falling? Sloane nodded. Yes, Lena whispered. Me, too. The ride to the venue was silent except for the occasional touch, fingers brushing, eyes meeting. When the car pulled up to the red carpet, Lena felt her pulse rise like a tidal wave. The door opened, flashing lights, voices. Sloane, is that Lena Quinn? Sloane, are you confirming the relationship? Lena reached for Sloane's hand. Sloane gripped hers firmly. We step out together, she said. And we walk. No matter what they say, eyes on me. Lena nodded. One breath, two. Then she stepped out into the light. The flashing cameras were relentless. The shouting louder than she'd imagined. Questions flew like arrows, but Sloane's hand stayed wrapped around hers. Sloane didn't rush, didn't flinch. She moved with a calm confidence. Lena envied, her smile soft but unyielding. Lena focused on the contact hand in hand, a quiet promise. When they reached the photo area, Sloane paused, turned toward her slightly, and whispered, "We can stop here." Lena looked at her. "No, I want to finish this with you." They posed together, not stiffly, not like a performance, just two women standing side by side in a storm of attention they hadn't asked for. And for the first time, Lena didn't feel like an intruder. She felt chosen. Later, inside the venue, the atmosphere was dim, warm, full of glass and laughter and elegant disinterest. Sloane introduced Lena to CEOs, actors, artists. Lena smiled, nodded, answered questions politely. She kept a glass of water in her hand and counted her breaths between conversations. But every time she looked up, Sloane was watching her quietly, protectively, proudly. At one point, after the third small talk spiral in a row, Lena escaped to the balcony. Sloane found her there a few minutes later. You okay? Lena leaned against the railing. I don't know. I feel like I've been wearing someone else's skin all night. Sloane stepped beside her. Do you regret coming? Lena shook her head. No, but I'm scared that this will keep growing, that I'll lose myself. Sloane was silent for a moment. Then she said, if I ever make you feel like you're disappearing, tell me. Scream it. Walk away if you have to, but don't let this swallow you. Lena turned to her. I don't want to walk away. Sloane reached out and cooped her face. Then let's keep choosing each other every step. Lena leaned into the touch. You promise? Sloane's voice didn't shake. I promise. When they kissed on that balcony, just once brief, but seen it was the image that would land on every magazine cover the next morning. But they didn't think about that yet. For now, all they felt was the night air, the shared breath between them, and the solid, undeniable truth of what they were building. Something real? Something chosen. Lena had thought the kiss on the balcony would be the moment everything shifted, and it was, but not in the way she expected. She had imagined a slow ripple, maybe a few more articles, some interviews reaching out, a bit of noise that would fade over time. But by the next morning, it was clear this was not a ripple. It was a tidal wave. Her face was on the homepage of every news outlet that covered celebrity culture, not as a footnote, as the headline. Sloane Vale makes it official. Meet her girlfriend, Lena Quinn. The photo was everywhere. Lena in green silk. Sloane's hand on her waist, lips brushing under the soft city lights. It was intimate. Too intimate. It hadn't been posed, hadn't been planned. And that made it all the more explosive. Her inbox filled in minutes. So did her voicemail, her social media notifications. Then came the calls from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Lena. The voice came through her phone around 10 a.m. She recognized it instantly. Her chest tightened. Ethan. Wow. He said a little bitter, a little amused. Didn't think I'd be hearing about you on the news. Lena swallowed hard, walking into her bedroom to get away from the noise outside. It's been a while. 3 years, he said. 3 years and suddenly you're the most Googled name on the internet. What do you want? She asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Just wondering if all this is real or if it's just a performance. Lena felt heat rise in her neck. It's real. So, you're actually dating her? Yes. Silence then. And she knows. Knows what? Lena asked sharply. You know what? Ethan said everything about before about us. Lena's blood turned cold. That's none of your business anymore. It might be hers, he said. Especially now that you're the center of attention. Don't call me again, she snapped and hung up. Her hands were shaking. She didn't realize she was crying until she sat down on the edge of the bed and wiped at her face. It wasn't just the call. It was the way it made her feel. Exposed, cracked open, dragged back into a life she'd spent years trying to rebuild. When Sloane texted a few minutes later, "You okay? I saw the headlines. Want to come over?" Lena didn't answer right away. She needed space. But more than that, she needed to figure out how much of her past she was ready to share, and if Sloane would still look at her the same way when she did. That night, after hours of trying to work and failing, Lena finally packed a small bag and called a car to Sloane's. The door opened before she knocked. Sloane didn't ask questions. She just pulled Lena inside and held her, the kind of hold that said, "I see you even when you're silent." They sat on the couch wrapped in one blanket, neither speaking for a long time. Then, finally, Lena said, "Someone called me today from my past." Sloane looked at her carefully. "Someone who hurt you. Someone I used to love a long time ago. It ended badly. And now they're reaching out because of all this." "Yes." Sloane didn't flinch. "Do you want to talk about it?" Lena hesitated, then quietly. "I used to be engaged to a man. Ethan." Sloane blinked but didn't speak. Lena continued, voice steadier now. "We were young. It was safe. We made sense on paper, but it never felt right. I kept telling myself it was enough, that maybe I just wasn't passionate. Maybe love wasn't fireworks for everyone. But the closer the wedding got, the more I felt like I was choking." Sloane was silent, listening. Lena looked down. "I left him 3 weeks before the wedding. I didn't give a big explanation. I didn't even fully understand it myself then. All I knew was that I couldn't spend my life lying to myself about what I wanted, who I was." She looked up, eyes glassy. "He was furious. Said I ruined him, and maybe I did, but I saved myself." Sloane's expression didn't change. She just reached out, took Lena's hand. "Thank you for telling me." Lena searched her face. "You're not upset." "Why would I be?" "Because I lied by omission. I didn't tell you earlier." Sloane squeezed her hand. "You told me when you were ready. That's not lying. That's protecting your peace." Lena exhaled, something inside her loosening. "I was afraid you'd think I wasn't sure about you, about us." "I'm not him," Sloane said. "And you're not who you were back then. You're here with me choosing this. That's what matters." Lena nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Sloane leaned in, wiped it gently away. "Do you still love him?" "No," Lena said immediately. "I don't think I ever did. Not like this." Sloane smiled softly. "Then let's not let his voice be louder than ours." That night, they lay in bed, not touching at first, just breathing together. Then Lena rolled onto her side, pulled Sloane closer, and rested her head against her chest. "I'm scared of losing myself in all this," she whispered. "You won't," Sloane said. "Because I'll remind you who you are, even on the days you forget." Lena closed her eyes, and for the first time since the call, she believed it. The story broke on a Wednesday. Lena was walking home from the bookstore, paper bag tucked under her arm, when her phone started buzzing nonstop. She didn't check it right away. She'd promised herself an hour offline, just 1 hour to be present to remember who she was without all the noise. But when she saw Raina's name flash across the screen 3 times in a row, she knew. Her fingers trembled as she opened the link. Sloane Vale's girlfriend once fled her own wedding. Former fiancé speaks out. There it was, her past, no longer hers. The article painted her as cold, unstable, indecisive. A woman who couldn't commit, who ran when things got too real. Ethan's quotes were carefully crafted, just vague enough to seem fair, just pointed enough to be cruel. "I hope she's finally found what she wants. I just wish she hadn't needed to destroy me to figure that out." Lena felt her knees go weak. Lena sat on the bench, blinking hard. The comments were worse than ever, speculation about her motives, her worth. Some defended her, most didn't. She tried to breathe, reminding herself she wasn't that girl anymore. The woman Ethan had loved never truly existed. Sloane called as Lena was unlocking her door. "I saw it. Are you okay?" Sloane's voice was steady but laced with anger. "No, but I'm managing," Lena answered. "Do you want me to come to you?" Sloane asked. "No. I want to come to you." When Lena arrived at Sloane's apartment, she collapsed into her arms. They didn't speak, just held each other, the silence saying everything. Later, wrapped in a blanket, Sloane spoke. "We could shut this down with my legal team." "No," Lena said softly. "Let them say what they want. I'm done hiding." Sloane, concerned, asked if she was sure. Lena nodded. "I want people to see who I really am. If they only see half the story, that's on them." Sloane smiled. "You amaze me." After a pause, Sloane said, "My mother wants to meet you." Lena blinked. "Wait, what?" Sloane smiled. "She saw the photos. She asked when I was going to stop pretending you were just a friend." Lena hesitated. "Sloane, meeting your mom is a lot." "I know," Sloane replied. "But you've carried my world for weeks. I want you to see the parts one protect." The next day, Lena dressed carefully, not for the press but for the woman who raised the person she was falling for. Sloane drove them to a brownstone in Harlem. Her mother was poised, tall, and full of warmth. "So, you're the one who made her soft," she said, after hugging Sloane. Later, as they sipped tea, Sloane's mother said, "She's never brought anyone here. Not even the woman we thought she'd marry." "Really?" Lena asked, surprised. "Really," her mother replied. "I don't know what this is between you two, but it's real. Because you're in her walls now." After dinner, as Sloane and Lena drove home, Lena said softly, "Your mom's terrifying." Sloane laughed. That was her being warm. The next night, Lena received an email, an interview request from a respected journalist. She showed Sloane the message. "I'm scared," Lena confessed. "What if I lose something if I say yes?" "You won't," Sloane reassured her. "You'll find yourself instead." Lena agreed to the interview. When asked, "Who are you, Lena Quinn?" she answered, "I'm someone who used to think quiet meant invisible. Then I met someone who saw me before I could see myself. I'm still falling." The segment aired. People no longer saw her as a mystery, they saw her as real, as brave. That night, Sloane whispered, "You made people see you. But you also reminded me how to see myself." Sloane and Lena spent their days together, building something real. One day, Sloane handed Lena a ring, a simple, gold band. "Not a proposal," Sloane said. "Just a placeholder for when we're ready." Lena slipped it on. "Let me give you something too," she said, kissing her softly, a vow in the kiss. They posed for a tourist's photo, smiling, their hands intertwined. Two women who met by accident, who stayed by choice, who loved by design, building something no headline could touch. The headlines didn't stop, not completely. They thinned, softened, shape-shifted from accusation to curiosity, from curiosity to commentary. But life, stubborn and ordinary, kept insisting on itself, laundry and client deadlines and a dog that preferred Lena's side of the couch. Weeks turned into a new kind of routine. Sloane left before dawn some mornings for board calls across time zones. Lena lingered at the window seat with coffee and a sketchbook, drawing the skyline into more forgiving lines. They met in the middle of days, a text, a shared sandwich, a look that said we're still here. The world watched, then got distracted, then watched again. The only constant was the decision beneath everything: keep choosing. Lorena adjusted first. She became the friend who could sit at Sloane's dinner table and needle a billionaire about the virtues of cheap pizza. Then nudge Lena later with a grin that said, "I see you. I see how you've changed and stayed the same." Marcus at the studio started screening Lena's emails until the noise died down. Sloane's assistant learned Lena's calendar without ever asking for it. In small ways, people made space. In small ways, Lena let them dot on a Sunday that tasted like late spring. Sloane took Lena north, past the churn of the city to a strip of river where the wind made the water look like brushed steel. "My father brought me here every May," Sloane said, hands in the pockets of a soft navy coat. "It's where he'd remind me that the company wasn't the only inheritance. Attention is a weather pattern. You dress for it and go outside anyway." Lena listened, the gold band warm against her skin. "What did you inherit that wasn't the company?" she asked. Sloane looked out at the water. "A stubborn belief that quiet can be a form of strength." She hesitated, then turned. "And lately, a better understanding that quiet isn't silence." Lena slid her fingers through Sloane's. "Good," she said. "Because I'm better when I'm heard." A week later, Lena took her own risk. She pitched a series at work, branding for small, community-rooted businesses that couldn't afford agencies like Lark and Company, low margin, high meaning, Marcus said, tapping a pen against his mug. You're asking us to do pro bono in a for-profit year. I'm asking us to remember why design matters, Lena replied. She invoked none of the leverage her new proximity could provide. She simply argued well. The pilot project, fonts made from the hand-painted signs of a family grocer, looked like a love letter to the neighborhood. The partners approved a trial. Lena walked home with a grin that had nothing to do with headlines and everything to do with the person she'd promised herself she wouldn't lose. They learned the choreography of each other's limits. Sloane left her phone on a tray by the door after 8 p.m. unless a crisis truly required breaking the rule. Lena tried not to vanish when overwhelmed. When she needed an hour to disappear, she sent a single lighthouse emoji first. Sloane never mocked it. She'd reply with an anchor. On the days when the coverage sharpened again, when an op-ed decided to diagnose Lena from 3 photographs, Sloane printed the piece, slid it into a folder labeled fiction, and shelved it next to Russian novels. We can sort it by tragedy later, she'd say dryly, and Lena would laugh. The sting diffused by the absurdity of a filing system for other people's fantasies. When Sloane's mother invited them to a small dinner, no headlines. Just a stew that simmered all afternoon. Lena brought flowers she'd chosen herself. Not the white lilies a florist suggested for elegance, but sun-heavy ranunculus the exact color of late daylight. She'll like these, Sloane said, surprised. She taught me to choose what feels alive, Lena replied, and felt the words land in the room like a tiny declaration. After dessert, Sloane's mother pulled out a box of old sheet music. She used to play, she told Lena. Wouldn't admit she loved it. Sloane rolled her eyes. But her hand found Lena's under the table. The interview Lena had nearly turned down kept traveling, not viral, just steady. A teacher in Ohio emailed to say her students discussed the difference between quiet and invisible. A woman in Manila messaged that she'd called her mother after 5 years of stubborn silence. Lena read each note slowly, like a fragile thing. They aren't seeing me as decoration, she murmured one night. They're seeing choices. Sloane pressed a kiss to her shoulder. You gave them a language, she said. You gave me one, too. They fought once, properly, not about the world but about the two of them. Sloane had cancelled a night out with 10 minutes' notice. Lena had smiled and said it was fine. Later, in bed, with the dark honest around them, she admitted it wasn't. I felt optional, she said, the word cracking in her mouth. Sloane stared at the ceiling for a long breath. That's how I learned to protect people. By taking myself off the board. I don't need that kind of protection, Lena said. I need a place to land. Sloane turned, eyes bright even in the dark. Then I'll be one, she said. The next morning, without ceremony, she sent 3 emails that restacked her week. It wasn't the grand gesture the internet adored. It was better, a schedule that made room for the life they were building when the cameras were off. Time did something gentle. The placeholder ring stopped feeling like a future tense and more like a present promise. Not yet, not never, just when we're ready. Sloane wore a matching band on a necklace, a quiet symmetry she never mentioned in public. They'll speculate anyway, she said. We might as well have symbolism worth their trouble. On an ordinary Thursday, in a hardware store that smelled like cedar and possibility, they argued about paint. Lena loved the gray with a hint of green. Sloane defended a softer bone. The clerk leaned on the counter like a referee. What's the room? He asked. Walls, Sloane said. Home, Lena corrected, and they both laughed, the fight dissolving into something looser. They bought small cans of both and went home to test swatches. Streaks on plaster like proof they were allowed to change the backdrop of their lives. Ethan's story didn't vanish. But it receded, the way a bruise fades to yellow and then memory. Once, on a winter afternoon, Lena saw a couple arguing on a stoop, and the ache of old shame rose like a ghost. She told Sloane that night, admitting the part of her that still wondered if leaving had ruined more than it saved. Sloane listened without interruption, then said, You didn't run from love. You ran toward it, toward the version of yourself who could offer it honestly. The sentence settled somewhere deep and stayed. When she repeated it later to Raina, her friend nodded. You can frame that, she said. Or tattoo it. Or both. Spring sharpened into summer. The charity gala season returned with its choreography of cameras and good intentions. Invitations arrived with embossed flourishes Lena no longer read with dread. They chose carefully, causes that mattered, rooms where showing up did more than feed a spectacle. In one of those rooms, under a cascade of glass and a string quartet, Lena found herself speaking to a line of young designers who'd recognized her from the interview. She did not apologize for being nervous. She told them about the bakery that paid her in cookies and the logo that looked better covered in flour. She told them about the way a life can tilt in a single improbable evening, and how most of the work happens in the mornings after. When she finished, Sloane was at the back, not clapping loudly, just smiling like the only audience that counted. On a wind-loud day in late August, they returned to the river. The city, blurred by heat, felt far away. Sloane had a paper bag with 2 sandwiches and a thermos. "I've been trying to plan something grand," she said, unscrewing the lid and failing at casual. "A spectacle the world could invade." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Sounds terrible." "It would have been," Sloane admitted. She took a breath. "I don't have a speech. I only have this: I don't want the placeholders anymore." She reached into her coat and pulled out a second band, this one the same quiet gold, but engraved inside with a single word: keep. "Not a contract. Not a ceremony," Sloane said, eyes steady. "Just a question: will you keep choosing me, day after day, in the ways that turn a life into a home?" Lena felt the yes rise before the tears. She didn't make it more ornate than it was. She nodded. "I will." Sloane's shoulders loosened like a tide leaving shore. They exchanged the bands with clumsy hands and laughter that tasted like relief. No one took a picture. The river kept its own counsel. They told no one for a week. They cooked too much pasta, spilled paint on the floorboards, read on opposite ends of the couch with their feet tangled like an agreement. When Raina finally noticed the glint as they passed a bakery window, she shrieked in 3 different keys and demanded dates and menus. "Not that," Lena said, grinning. "Just us." Raina hugged her hard. "Then let me throw you a party for not letting the world define what counts." They compromised: friends on a rooftop, a playlist that made the skyline sway. A cake that said keep in frosting small enough to be their secret. The articles that followed, because there were always articles, called it unconventional, quiet, confusing. Someone tried to make it a trend. Another tried to make it a statement on generational fatigue with institutions. Sloane put the best of them in the fiction folder anyway. "Let them be wrong loudly," she said. "We'll be right softly." In the first cold of November, Lena hung the finished paintings over the window seat, 2 small canvases, nearly monochrome, where the gray-green and bone settled into each other in a thin, luminous line. Sloane stood behind her, arms a-roo. "What's it called?" she asked. Lena leaned back into her, letting the question sit. "Proof," she said finally. "Proof that they could make a room feel like theirs. Proof that a mistake on a guest list could open a door and, instead of swallowing her, lead her to the one person who taught her to walk through without apology. Proof that love, when built on daily, unglamorous choosing, could be the least accidental thing in the world." That night, before they turned off the lamps, they placed their phones on the tray by the door and watched the city in quiet. The bands on their hands caught the light, not bright, just certain. "Tomorrow?" Sloane asked. "Tomorrow," Lena said. And the weather, inside the rooms they'd made, held.